Hey everyone.
Hey guys! Hopefully you can all hear
I
us and
hope you
see
guys can all
us.
see us. And let us know in the chats if you can't see us or if you can't hear us okay. Yeah, today we're going to be talking about locations. And I guess we'll get started. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat. Kat's going to be looking out for those, and we'll try our best to answer them during the presentation. There will be a Q&A session at the very end as well, so we have some time for that. The other thing I wanted to quickly mention is this was meant to be a 20-minute webinar. Turns out there's a lot of information and a lot more to learn about locations, so we might go over a little bit, but if you need to leave, no worries. We're going to be posting this webinar on our YouTube channel as well as on our webinar page. So you'll be able to watch the recording, of course. But yeah, stick around if you'd like to learn some cool things about locations. So I think we're good to start. So let's get going. And the first thing we're going to sort of go over are our goals. So today we're going to learn how to set up locations in inFlow properly and why it's important to set them up properly in the first place. We're also going to understand how locations are handled in inFlow. So if you're tracking multiple locations in inFlow, you're probably wondering how inFlow knows which location to receive inventory to or pick inventory from, and we're going to go through that. And then for you guys who have been with us for a very long time, or you are an inFlow power user, I'm sure you're going to learn some tips and customization tricks that are going to help optimize your workflow and make things a little bit more automated for your teammates in terms of the location settings. So we're going to learn a lot today. So let's start with an important question. Why do you need to set up locations properly in inFlow in the first place? Well, of course, you want to have real-time inventory across all of your locations. So for instance, if I'm tracking inventory at a warehouse and 2 retail shops that get inventory fulfilled from the warehouse, receive inventory from the warehouse, I want to know what I have in stock in each of these locations so that I know when I need to reorder more, transfer more stock from the warehouse to the shops to keep them fully stocked. So it's really important to set up your locations so that you have real-time inventory data from across all of them. And of course, if you are tracking inventory more than one location, you want to make sure that you're receiving and picking your products from the correct locations so that, again, that contributes to that real-time inventory and your stock levels are up to date in all of your locations. And then it's very important to set up your inventory locations properly for the reorder stock feature. So if you're new to inFlow or if you haven't heard about this feature before, inFlow can help let you know when you need to reorder more of a product. So if you fall below a specific point in your stock levels, inFlow can let you know that you need to reorder more of that product. And this reorder feature is per product per location. So you can set up different reorder points for each of your locations. So if I have my warehouse and my 2 shops, each one of my 3 locations can have a different reorder point for the same product because each location might have different needs. With that in mind, since the reorder feature goes by location, it's really important that you set up your locations to represent buildings. And if you're tracking sublocations, you're setting the sublocations up so that they represent shelves, aisles, or bins within that specific building. And I bring this up because if you're only tracking inventory in one location, it could be very easy to set up your sublocations as locations instead of dedicated sublocations. And this would cause a problem with the reorder feature because the reorder feature is per location. So it's looking at your inventory across all of your sublocations within a specific location to determine whether or not you need to reorder more stock. So if you're setting up your locations wrong, where your sublocations are set up as locations, the reorder feature won't work. So it's very important that you set up your locations properly for this feature. And if you do want to learn more about our reorder stock feature, we actually did a webinar, I think a couple weeks ago, on this feature. So I absolutely recommend that you check that out. It's posted on our webinar page. And Kat, if you don't mind actually maybe posting that in the
Totally.
chats, please check that out. We also have a great knowledge base article that goes through it as well on our support page. All right, so now we're going to do a quick demo of how to set up your locations. Most of you are probably already way beyond the step, but it's going to be a very quick demo. Okay, and you're going to see our faces for just a little bit. Okay. All right, so hopefully you guys can see my screen right now. Looking good?
Perfect.
Awesome. Okay, so I'm showing you guys our Windows desktop app. I'm just going to do the demo here, but I'm also going to do a demo on the web app for those who don't have access to the Windows app. So don't worry, we're going to go through that very quickly together. So your location settings are going to be in your settings. Surprise, surprise. You can get to it by clicking on settings from the homepage or from the main menu options and then settings. And there we go. And under track inventory by, this is where you can select whether or not you want to track sublocations or not. So you can enable sublocations, so tracking those just by checking off this option here. And then you'll go into manage inventory locations to add your locations in inFlow. So here we go. If you've opened up the program for the first time, or if you haven't made any changes to your locations before, you'll notice that you have one location already set up, and it's just titled default location. That's what you'll have by default. And the default location is important because it's going to be the location that inFlow is going to set as the default location on orders to receive inventory to or fulfill inventory from. So unless you specify otherwise, inFlow is always going to set that the location, the receiving location or the picking location to your default location. And you always do have to have a default selected, and you'll be able to check by that yellow star. So I'm going to go ahead and create a location, or just rename this one to my Toronto warehouse, because I'm going to use that as my example here. And then I'm going to set up my two shops as my second and third locations. So retail shop 1 and retail shop 2. And from here, you can also set up your sublocations if you're tracking them. So you can click into edit sublocations, and you'll select the location that you'd like to edit the sublocations for. I'll go to my Toronto warehouse, and I've actually already set up some sublocations for this location. I've got my aisles set up from A to H. So that's how you're going to set up the sublocations. So pretty straightforward. Again, you want your locations to be set to physical buildings and your sublocations to be set to aisles, bins, inside your main locations. And now just to take you guys to the web app in case we have users here. Yeah.
Sorry,
Ooh.
Dani. Just one quick
Mhm.
question from Golden since you're on the desktop app. If they currently have a default location set up, but they want to remove it and make another location as a default location, can you show just how to
Oh,
change that?
yeah. Great question. Yes. So if you are looking to change your default locations, so you can rename any locations you currently have to something new. And then if you want to change default locations, you'll just select the little star next to it. So just like that.
And then if you want to deactivate a location, would you be able
Mm,
to show how you do that?
yes. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new location. We'll just call it dummy location. And if you want to deactivate it, you're just going to go ahead and select it and click that little minus sign. So erasing it isn't going to work. You actually have to go through this minus sign. So you might get some error if you try erasing it. You can always reactivate old locations. So I have a whole bunch of old locations that I've set up, and you can always reactivate them.
Yeah. And one thing just to take note of is if you deactivate a location, but you still have stock in that location,
Yes.
it won't completely remove that location from those stock levels. So you will still show inventory in those in that deactivated location. So until you run out and then reorder to a separate location, or you transfer your stock to an existing location that you're using, it will still show up in your current stock screen. But that's just something to take note of.
That's a
And
very, very good point.
we also have a couple more questions. So Danielle's just asking, is it possible to make default locations based on order prefixes? We have different stores holding stock and would like the prefixes to categorize automatically where stock comes from.
That is an excellent question.
So at the moment, I don't think that would be possible. We could try to play around with it when we go into our location hierarchy. So I think in that case, it wouldn't work with main location. I think it would potentially work with a sublocation because a sublocation, you can order it so that it's alphabetical order as one of the options, but I don't think it'll work in as like a main location. Yeah.
Yes. We will talk about how you can customize which location inFlow will pull from by default. And we'll see, for example, maybe the customer might work for you guys. We'll see. It might be a workaround that won't work, but you guys will see how you can customize that fulfill location. It won't go by sales order number, but it can go by customer. So we'll see that.
Mhm. And then one last question from Laura, which we kind of answered a little bit, but if you change a location name, what happens to previous record that's tied to that previous name? So I don't know if you want to explain that. I've actually seen this error kind of occur on someone's database where they changed the actual name. So they didn't deactivate the location, they just changed it. So it will show us that new location name on previous orders, and it can get quite confusing. So if you are going to be changing a name, I think it's actually better to deactivate it if you've been using it for previous orders and then add a separate location, because it's going to start to kind of, get really confusing there. So, yeah.
Good tip. Good tip. That's
And
something
then
new I didn't know. So
yeah, I've just seen it once,
awesome.
and since then I've kind of been recommending to deactivate the location instead of changing like your default location name. For some people it'll work if they're just starting new with inFlow. So if you haven't really processed too much in there, you can change the name. But if you've been using inFlow for quite some time, it can get confusing of like
Nice.
what was the old name. But and then there was a question from Joe, but Joe, I think that may pertain to a further demo, so we'll answer that question a little bit later or in the Q&A section.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you guys for asking those questions. Okay, so now that we've gone through the desktop app, we'll just switch over to the web app very quickly, just so that we can see how that's done from the web app, how you can add locations. And here's a quick tip. If you want to get to our web app really quickly from the desktop app, you can just go into your main menu, options, and then account team. And that might open up in my other screen. So let's give that a moment. Yes. I'm just going to bring that over. Aha. And everything's a little bit slower when I stream, so
Since we're still waiting for it to load up, just to actually, Joe's question does pertain to deactivating locations or deactivating a product. If you reactivate a product and it has your previous movement history, everything that you had previously will still show up. So inFlow doesn't really delete anything, and that's kind of the pro of us being able to just deactivate instead of deleting history, is you'll be able to pull that information up even if you've deactivated a product. It's not going to disappear from the system.
okay, there we go. Sorry, that took a little bit long. But yes, if you're in the web app, so if you're logging in just from our website, you can just go on inflowinventory.com, then log in. You can log into your account, or as you saw there, you can get to the web app from the desktop app. Once you're here, you're going to navigate to your company settings. So you can click on your name in the top right, then company settings. And then the first thing you're going to see is this location tile, and this is where you're going to manage your locations. So we're going to click into manage locations. And I apologize, it's a little bit slow whenever I stream, so we'll give it a moment here. And there are the 3 locations that I've just set up from the desktop app. So obviously your data is being synced between all 3 apps. So you're going to see all of the 3 locations I've set up, and that the yellow star is going to be your default location that you can switch. This is also going to be where you're going to enable or disable tracking sublocations. And then just a little bit of a difference from the desktop app. You'll have to edit sublocations or add new locations from the product record. So I'll show you that very quickly. So here's where you can set up new locations. You can click on add location, show inactive, very similar to the desktop app. But when it comes to adding sublocations or removing them, you're going to go to your product record. So I'm going into my product list, and I'll just select a product that I have here. And if you couldn't tell, I am my test database is all about glasses. Lots of pretty pictures of those. But in the product record here, we'll see the quantity on hand, and we'll be able to see all of the locations that I am tracking. So there's my Toronto warehouse. And as Kat has mentioned, I obviously don't have, when you guys were watching me set up my locations, I didn't have LA showroom there, but I still have stock there. And the reason is when I was deactivating locations, I didn't zero out the stock in those locations. So inFlow is not just going to throw those out. So it's going to continue tracking inventory in deactivated locations. So if you do not want to see deactivated locations in stock, in those locations, you'll want to zero out those locations first. And we can do that with an import. So it's pretty straightforward. We have a knowledge base article on that if you ever need to do that.
Or transferring stock too.
Or transferring stock,
I've noticed
yes.
some users do that instead, because if they're going to be not using one particular location, they're going to just transfer it over to one that's existing. Yeah.
Yes, good call. And it's pretty straightforward on how to do that with this stock transfer screen. So it is possible. But once you're in this quantity on hand section, you can click into the drop down next to your main location that you're tracking, and you'll see all of the sublocations that you're tracking there. So I've got 10 of this item in my B4 sublocation, and you can add sublocations as well if you'd like. From this screen. So it's a little bit different from the desktop app, but again, the features, you can keep track of sublocations. You'll just have to update them from the product record itself. Okay, so that's how you create locations and edit them from the desktop app and the web app. And now we're just going to go back to our handy dandy slides. Okay, and we're going to talk about now how inFlow handles locations on orders. So how does inFlow know which location to receive inventory to or pick inventory from? This is going to be probably the most important part and big takeaways here. So right now you're seeing a screenshot of a purchase order from the desktop app. And if you're using the web app or the mobile apps, I'm going to be going through those as well very quickly after this slide. So don't worry. But what I have highlighted here with the red square is the order level location. So on a purchase order, as you guys know, purchase orders are used to receive inventory from your vendors. And that location dropdown is where you're going to tell inFlow where that inventory should be received to. So you'll notice there that it's set to Toronto warehouse. And if you guys remember, my Toronto warehouse is set to my default location. So whenever you're creating a new purchase order or sales order, that location dropdown is going to be automatically filled with your default location. So this is why it's important to know which and set up your default location properly, because it's always going to be set up in this way unless you change your settings. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a little bit. But that's going to be our order level location, especially when I refer to that location field, order level location. Now, it is possible to override this. If we go into the Receive tab of a purchase order, so that's just down right over here, you'll notice that there's also a location and a sublocation column in the table. So the Receive tab is used to track items that you've received from your vendors so far. So this is especially important if you're partially receiving a purchase order, like if your vendor sends you items in batches or not all at once. And it's also important to use if you are receiving inventory into sublocations, because this is where you're going to specify which sublocation an item is going to be received to. And the other thing it's important for is if you're receiving inventory to multiple locations on the same order. So this location and sublocation fields are going to override the order level location always. And that's a really big takeaway. And you'll notice this theme and this behavior in all of our transactions, so sales orders, work orders, as we'll go through. So next will be our work order, just to go over that. If you are using our manufacturing features and you're building finished products from components, our work orders also have an order level location field. It's highlighted there, and again, it's set to my Toronto warehouse because it's my default. But of course, you can override that. So if you go into a pick tab of a work order, which is where you're going to add items that you've picked so far, so especially if you're keeping track of your progress in picking the components, you can specify the sublocation and which location inFlow should pick, deduct inventory from. And this is always going to override the order level location. And then you might be wondering how you can automate this process, especially if you have products that are always being stored in a specific sublocation. And we will talk about that as well. And of course, with work orders, you can also put away your finished products to a specific location. And again, it's going to override your order level location. And here's just a few screenshots from our mobile app if you're using that. And please do install it if you're not. It's very helpful to see your inventory on the go. From left to right, we have our purchase order screen and our sales order screen and our transfer stock screen from the mobile app. And you'll notice each one of them has a field where you can specify the location and for a transfer stock screen, of course, you have to specify which location you're transferring stock from and which location you're transferring it to. So what you'll see there with my my red arrow is that in this case, I'm actually transferring between sublocations. So in each of our apps, you'll be able to specify the order level location as well as the pick or fulfill or receive locations. So that's very important here. And then finally, for our web users, here is a screenshot of our sales orders as it looks like from the web. And surprise, surprise, there is a location drop down as well. That's going to be the order level location. So unless otherwise specified, inFlow is going to pick or fulfill products on the order from that location. So we can see that it's set to the Toronto showroom. But just like the desktop app, there is also a fulfill tab, and any location information that's added to this tab is going to override the order level location in the main tab. So hopefully you guys are seeing that there's a bit of a hierarchy going on. So how does inFlow determine which location to set? And we're going to go over that and how you can optimize that and automate it a little bit to make your workflow more efficient, especially for different team members that might be working in different locations. So yeah, I guess any questions?
Yeah, so there are a couple of questions. Laura also mentioned that we do have a knowledge base article about all of this and how to manage your receive tab and make sure that it's all organized and correct. So that is, I'll post that actually in the comments afterwards. But Patrice was wondering, and I mean, you kind of showed this via the demo, but whether her manager can see all 18, they have 18 pop-up locations, and whether they can see that on the mobile app and like what purchase orders are coming in and what sales orders I guess are coming out as well. So as Dani showed, you are able to actually select your received locations in there, so you can keep a good track. The only thing is there aren't any reports on the mobile app, at least right now there aren't any. Maybe we'll have some in the future, but if you want to run some reports, the best way to do that would be either via the desktop app or the web app. And then one other question Golden had asked is, and this is a little bit off topic, but how can I know product aging at any particular location? So this is specifically to reporting, and I think we can check that out afterwards, but I'm pretty sure at the moment we can't select it by location. I think right now product aging is based on your entire inventory, but that is something that, again, we'll double check, but if it's not possible, we'll put in a feature request with our developers.
Yeah, thank you for these questions too. And yeah, the product aging, that'd be interesting to find out because I don't know off the top of my head actually. But yeah, I guess we'll get into the location hierarchy a little bit more. So hopefully you guys have understood that the receive or the pick or the fulfill tabs or in that level is always going to override the order level location. So just again, there's that screenshot of the fulfill tab or the receive tab on a purchase order. That's always going to override the order level location that's selected here. So you might be wondering, well, how does inFlow decide other than the default location how to set, or if there's any sort of customizations that we can do or optimizations for selecting that order level location. And we're going to go through that and we'll go through some other optimizations that you can do with even the pick and receive tabs. So let's get into our demo and just a second here. I'm going to be demoing off of the Windows app, but just know that whatever you guys see me do here, you can do in the web app as well. The steps are going to be very similar. It'll just look a little bit different. And we do have knowledge base articles on all of this as well. So if you ever do need specific steps, you can always refer to those. Okay, so I'm in our Windows desktop app. Let's take a look at a sales order as an example, and just to show you how that order level location looks like. And it will take a few moments here. Okay, so here's our sales order. Sales orders, as you know, are used to keep track of inventory that you're selling to your customers. And you'll notice here that my order level location is automatically set to my default Toronto warehouse location. Now, what if I have team members that are working out of different locations and they're only fulfilling from those locations? It would be very inefficient for that team member to always have to go into this location drop down and select their fulfillment location. So, for example, if I've got an employee at Retail Shop 1, they're only fulfilling from Retail Shop 1. So it adds a bit of human error, or a chance for human error if they need to go in every single time and switch this order level location. So what you can do is set up user defaults or personal defaults so that each team member can set up their own default location, which will override the system default. So the way that you're going to do that is from the settings. So main menu, options, and then personal settings. And this can be done for each team member login. So this is done on a per login basis. And you'll notice in the personal settings, there's a default location that you can set. So for my user, Dani, I'm going to set my location to Retail Shop 1 because that's the only place that I should be fulfilling from. And I'm going to save and close. And if I create a new sales order, you'll notice now that it's set to Retail Shop 1. So it's going to override the system default. And that way it sort of minimizes human error and also makes things a little bit more efficient. Now there's another optimization that you can add that's going to help optimize things a little bit further. If you have a customer that you're always fulfilling inventory from a specific location, let's say they happen to be a wholesale customer and I'm always fulfilling from my main warehouse, no matter where I receive that sales order from or to. I want to make sure that whenever I create a sales order for this customer, it's always being fulfilled from that location, from my Toronto warehouse. So what you can do is set up customer defaults. So let's do that together. That's just going to be in the customer record. So I'm going to select Smith Optical. And in the extra info tab of the customer record, we'll see that default location again, and we can select that for our customer. So if this is a a wholesale customer for me, I'm going to set that to my warehouse. And I'm going to save it. And now if I create a new sales order, I'm going to go ahead, do it the long way. You'll notice that my location is set to my personal default, but as soon as I switch over or select the customer Smith Optical, it defaults to their customer preference, so default customer location. So this gives a little bit more of a, I guess, optimization and efficiency to your workflow. And again, the customer default, so there's again this hierarchy. The customer default is going to override your personal default, which will override your system defaults. So there's that hierarchy. Now, I'm sure you guys have run into this issue before. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do a mock sales order with you guys together. And I've set the location to my Toronto warehouse. Now I'm going to add a product here, my product Banshee. And I'm getting this red exclamation mark, and I know that I have enough in stock. I remember checking my stock levels for this item. Why am I getting that red exclamation mark? And maybe you guys are already know the answer here. But it turns out that for this product, I have 49 in stock. So I definitely have enough in stock, but I have it in stock in my LA warehouse. So whenever you're seeing this red exclamation mark for a product on an order, it means that you don't have enough of that product in the order level location to fulfill that order. And if I were to fulfill this order right now, inFlow is not going to be deducting stock from my LA warehouse. It's going to deduct stock from my Toronto warehouse, and I'm going to go into the negative inventory. So you want to be very mindful of these red exclamation marks, and that's giving you indication that you don't have enough in stock. You need to reorder more for that location. But in the case that you want inFlow to pull from any location that has stock, there is something that you can do to have inFlow not go by the order level location, but instead pull from wherever you have in stock. And maybe you've already thought of the answer here or how to do it, but if you haven't, the way that you can sort of get around this is by leaving the location field blank. So if you do this, and if I go ahead and save that, you'll notice that that red exclamation mark disappears. And that's because as soon as I fulfill this order, inFlow is going to pull it from wherever I have stock. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my pick tab and just autofill it very quickly. And you can see here that it's automatically pulling from my LA warehouse from the B6 sublocation. So that's something you can do to sort of override the system defaults. And in fact, we have created a setting that you can make this be the default behavior whenever you're creating sales orders. So if you always want inFlow to pick from anywhere you have in stock rather than go by your system default or your user default, you can set that up, or sorry, your system default. You can set that up from from the web app. So this setting is going to be primarily found in the web app or only found in the web app. So let's go ahead and navigate there. So again, I'm just going to my account team. And that's going to open up in a new tab, but here we are. You can also navigate from the web app by clicking on your name here. You're going to go to company settings. And in the locations tile there is the picking options. So let's go ahead and click into that. And there are two picking options that you can select or customize, but in our case, we just want to focus on this one for now. So this option here allows you to set the order level location on sales orders to either your company default location. So by default, it should be set to your default location, unless it is overridden by customer or personal defaults, or you can have inFlow set that location to blank so that inFlow can pull from any stock that you have location or any location you have stock in. And this is as long as it's not overridden by any customer personal defaults. So I'm going to set that setting so that inFlow will automatically set that the order level location to blank. And let's just take a look at what that looks like. So I'm going to create a new sales order. Okay, so we see that it's not set to blank, but instead it's set to my user defaults. So that's because I haven't erased my user defaults. So I'm just going to do that very quickly from the settings, and I'm taking the long way here. But I'm going to remove my user defaults, save. I'm going to create a new sales order. And you'll see that it's set to blank. So we do have those picking options available for you to decide whether or not, or if that's going to work for your workflow a little bit better. And just to continue on the picking options, one thing that you also might be wondering is how sublocations can be automated. How can you make it so that you're not always selecting which sublocation inFlow should be pulling from? So if you are keeping track of sublocations, you can actually set default sublocations per product. That way, whenever you're adding that product to an order, inFlow will automatically deduct stock from that sublocation. So if that's something that you do, where you always store a product in a specific sublocation, that doesn't change, then you might want to set up your product default sublocations. So let's take a look at that very quickly. So I'm just going to add a my Archon product to this order. Now my location is set to my Toronto warehouse location because that's the customer default for Smith Optical. And if I go into my pick tab and autofill here, so inFlow, I do have enough in stock in my Toronto warehouse in the A2 location, so it is going to pull from there. But if I want to always pick from a specific sublocation, in my Toronto warehouse, I can do that from the reorder settings. So the reorder settings, you don't have to enable reordering to set your product default sublocations, but it's just that's where you're going to be selecting it. And I'm actually going to select a different product in this case that doesn't have any reorder settings set up. Okay, so here's my product wheel. I've got 20 in my Toronto warehouse, and I've got 10 in my Toronto A1 warehouse. So if I go, so you might be wondering, if I don't set up any sort of default settings, uh, inFlow is going to choose my sublocations for me by default if I don't override it in the pick tab. And not to jump around too much, but there is another picking option that you can select, so that inFlow can either prioritize picking from the location with the highest quantity or the location in alphabetical order. So let's just quickly jump back to our picking options. Just over here from the web app, the one that we just talked about was this one here, but let's talk about this one very quickly. So you can prioritize how inFlow should be picking when you don't have an order level location selected. So would you like inFlow to pick from sublocations with the highest quantity, locations or sublocations with the highest quantity? Or would you like to have inFlow pick from locations or sublocations in alphabetical order? So I'm going to select this option here. So from locations or sublocations with highest quantity, just to show you guys the example. But if you are keeping track of lots or expiry dates in inFlow, our suggestion and recommendation of how to do that is actually to set up your lots and expiry dates as sublocations. So in this case, you'd want inFlow to be picking in alphabetical order, so it's picking from the oldest sublocation first on orders. And we do have a webinar that goes through how to track batches and lots and expiry dates in inFlow if you do want to learn more. But this option here is really helpful for that. It's also helpful if you're following our street style picking recommendation. So if you're not familiar with street style picking, we have a blog post about that. I feel like I'm throwing a lot of resources at you guys, but just to make you aware that we do have recommendations on how you can set up your warehouse to optimize picking. And again, if you are using street style picking, the alphabetical order option is going to be helpful here. But in our case, I'm just going to go with the highest quantity. I'm going to go ahead and save that, and just so that you guys can see what that looks like. So with that setting set up, we would expect that inFlow is going to pull just from my Toronto warehouse with no sublocation selected first before it goes into pulling inventory for my A1 sublocation. So let's go ahead and sell this product. I'm going to create a sales order from the product record. I'm just going to do one here, and if I click into pick, oh, and it's going by my A1 location instead. So that might just be the, I'm wondering why that is, but we'll see. You know what, I'll have to look into that. But in any case, if you did want to have inFlow pull from a specific sublocation by default, you can go into the edit reorder settings, and I'm going to create actually a new sublocation very quickly. So we'll do B1 instead. I'll say that I've got 30 in stock.
I find sometimes that when you change the settings, that if you don't like refresh the page after a few seconds, it might not accept the new settings. So if you just like recently change it, especially if you're switching from web app to the desktop.
Actually, that's a good point. Restarting the program might actually help here, especially, you're right, if I'm switching between apps. But yeah, I guess just know that there is that option to set highest, to have inFlow pick from highest sublocation with the highest quantity, or go by alphabetical, and it'll depend on your picking flow. But let's say I want inFlow to always pick from my B1 location by default. Regardless of those settings, those picking options, you can go into the reorder settings. So again, you don't have to enable, oh, that would explain why I was actually pulling from the A1 location, because I didn't reset my product before our demo today. But this is going to be where you can select which default sublocation inFlow should pull from, and this will override any picking options that you have. So that's why it was pulling from the A1 location, even though I had more stock in my other location. But let's go ahead and just show you guys how this works. I'm going to click into my B1 location. That's going to be my default sublocation. I'm going to click on OK. And actually, I'm going to go ahead and change this to 5 units in stock. So based on my picking settings, I haven't restarted the program, but I'm I have faith that this might work. Based on my picking settings, you would expect that inFlow should go by this location here. But since I've set up my default sublocation, let's see if inFlow will pick the B1 location this time. So I'm going to create a new sales order. So create sales order from the product record. And I'm going into the pick tab and I'm autofilling. Aha, so it did work this time. And it worked last time, but anywho, the sublocation is going to be set to the default sublocation. So that way you don't have to worry about setting the sublocations manually in the pick or the ship tab, or sorry, the pick or the receive tabs. And of course you can click into any of the sublocations and select a non-default sublocation if you'd like. But this sort of helps to automate the process a little bit more so that there's less human error and your workflow is more efficient. And you can actually import your product default sublocations. And sorry, I went through it a little bit quickly, but essentially you're going to set up that default sublocation per location. So I've got my 3 locations here, and I can set up a default sublocation per location. So depending on what order level location I have set up here, inFlow is going to deduct stock from that default sublocation in the pick tab. So hopefully that was clear there. If any questions while I still have, I guess, inFlow in demo mode.
One question that Ozzy had asked actually quite some time ago is with integrations. We obviously have, like, for a Shopify integration, you can choose your main location where it's going to default from. But would inFlow's, I guess, hierarchy work with integrations as well? So based on the settings that you have, I don't know if you'd be able to answer that question
That's a
without
really good
testing.
question. Yeah, you know what? I don't remember off of the top of my head. I think this question came up before, but I can't remember. So yeah, we can definitely get back to you about that. But really good question.
Yeah, we'll test it out and then probably put it. I guess we can just respond in the Facebook chat afterwards, after today's
Yes.
webinar. Yeah.
Hmm.
And then another question, and I'm testing this out right now as well, um, is from Cal, and he was just curious about how to reorganize your sublocations because he has his bins numbered like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then it goes to 10, 11, and then 20, 28. So he has a bunch of numbers, but inFlow organizes it in a way so it goes bin 1 and then it goes bin 10 because it uses the
Yes.
first digit. Now, I think Laura had responded by saying that maybe by adding a 0 in front of it, it could help. I don't think that does. I was just testing it right now. So I think that's just something that we can definitely pass along to our team. Maybe having an option where you can organize it a little bit differently, not using it the sequential way of like that next number.
It should actually. So I'm pretty sure it should.
Is there a way? Okay.
Yes, I
I
think
don't know if you could
so.
test it out.
Yeah, I think that might be the way we recommend it in our blog post about street style picking. I would absolutely recommend reading that, Cal, because I think this might be relevant for you guys. But yes, I think if you add for example, for you do 0001 for bin 1, so B0001 or B0010 for bin 10. So if you add those leading zeros, it should stay alphabetical.
Yeah, so it's an extra 0 then for anything that's going, um, I guess, past that first one, the
Yes.
first number. Okay. Yeah, because I was just testing it with 1 0, and that will not help. You'll have to add an extra leading 0.
Yes, I believe so. And I forget the term, the mathematical term is a decimal place. I forget. But yes, you'll add some leading zeros there.
I can
Great
definitely
question.
see if we have a blog post, as you mentioned, on that.
Yeah,
Or would it be a KB?
it should be a
Okay.
blog post. So I think Tamim wrote it. So
Okay. Then I'll see if I can look it up, and we can definitely post that after I find it.
cool. All right. And I'm just going to switch off of our demo back to our handy dandy slides. Okie dokie.
And then Laura's having some issues with the main presentation. Hopefully, once Dani presents it again, you'll be able to see it.
Yeah, hopefully you guys can see that. Back to the slides. All right. So just to go over our location hierarchy one more time as a summary, receive or the pick level tab or fulfill tab, that's always going to override the locations. There are always going to override the order level location. And in terms of the order level, you can set up customer defaults, which will override user defaults, and personal defaults, which will override system defaults. And then we also talked about the receive, some automation that you can do, and some options that you can set up in terms of picking. So you can tell inFlow if you'd like to have it pick alphabetically, or if you want it to pick from the location with the highest quantity. And we talked about the blank location field. So if you'd like inFlow to pull from any location that has stock, you can set the order level location to blank. And you can actually set that up to have that behavior be the default behavior whenever you're creating orders or transactions. And then we also talked about setting up product default sublocations, and these will override your picking settings. So if you always want inFlow to pick from a specific sublocation, or a product from a specific, pick a product from a specific sublocation, you can set up that product default sublocation per location. Okay, so that's pretty much how locations work in inFlow, and how inFlow manages them and handles them on different transactions and orders. And just to finish up the webinar, I'm going to go through a few workflows that use locations primarily as the basis of the workflow. And this might be helpful for you in your business, even if it's not something you considered before. But we're going to go over some how to handle and how to track assets or job site tracking, how to track items out for repair, and also how to use locations to sort of work around process tracking and production tracking. So first, let's talk about asset job site tracking very quickly. So this is going to be if you want to keep track of internal assets. So for example, if you have employees that you give computers to, and you always want to keep track of which employee has an asset or a computer, you can use locations to do that. So what your setup would look like is you'd create locations or sublocations in inFlow to represent employees or jobs. And you'll see my little location screenshot there. I've got my Toronto warehouse, and then I've also set up locations for each of my employees. So John and Jane and Martin have been set up as locations. And you can use stock transfers to transfer your products or assets from your main location to your employee location, so that when you're looking at your inventory for a specific product, you can see what you currently have in stock, and also what each of your employees has. And obviously, once they've returned that asset back to you, you just create a stock transfer from their location back to your main location. So that's how you can use locations to track assets. You can also use locations to track items out for repair. It's a very similar workflow where you're going to set up a location in inFlow to represent items out for repair, and you'll use stock transfers to transfer those products from your main location to the repair location once they're out for repair. And once you've received that item back from the repair location, you'll just do a stock transfer to transfer it back. So very straightforward, very easy. And then finally, this is a little bit niche, but if you'd like to keep track, if you're manufacturing, for example, and you'd like to keep track of different processes that your products are currently in, you can set up your locations or your sublocations to represent different points in production, for example. So I've got my screenshot there. You can see my location set up as phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 packaging, just as an example. And then you can use stock transfers again to transfer inventory from one process to another. Or of course, that work order put away tab in the pick tab. So you can pick components from a specific phase or process and put it into another process, like going from phase 3 to packaging. And there's that put away tab just to show that. But that pretty much wraps up the webinar on managing multiple locations. Hopefully you guys learned something and learned something new. Any Q&A or any questions that we can go over? Oh no, I think you might be muted, Kat.
Oh no, sorry. I was trying not to make that clicky sound when I was typing. So we do have a question from Alan where he's asking, do you suggest keeping SKUs for products with the same look at sorry, so just keeping SKUs for products the same at all locations, or do you recommend having different SKUs at different locations? So I think this is personal preference and
Hmm.
like depends on the business itself, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure why you'd want to have different SKUs at different locations. I'm not sure what the use case would be for that. Maybe you can let us know if you have some ideas, but I imagine that most people would want to keep the SKU the same across all of your locations, just for consistency. Um, the other thing is, of course, the SKU. So if you are keeping track of SKU, it's going to be you can't do it per location. So, or just to clarify that, you can only save one SKU per product, if I'm not mistaken.
Mhm.
And you can't set a specific SKU to a certain location without creating separate product records per location.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask. So like that was, would you ever even recommend creating a brand new product to do a separate SKU for a location? I think that would be a lot of extra work, and if you have integrations, that can cause more trouble.
Yeah, I would say only if these are variations of a product and you're really wanting to track, the sell how you're purchasing and you're selling for those variations, then you'd want to create separate records. But I'm not sure what the use case would be per location to have a different SKU for the same item. But you can enlighten us if you have some workflow, because we'd love to learn about it.
Mhm. And then Ozzy had a question that you kind of went over in the demo, but can products be allocated to locations in different stages of the production, which is kind of what you mentioned with using sub-locations to track the production stage. And he specifically went over his workflow of, it going from raw products to like a roasting room, and then the fulfillment center when it's packaged and shelved. So yeah, you can definitely use the sub-locations for that,
Hmm.
as Danny had shown. And then Sergey had mentioned, do we have more webinars for invoicing issue sales orders? So if you're referring to just like fulfilling sales orders, we definitely do have a webinar for that. Um, Now, I don't know if we go over any kind of issues with that you may encounter while invoicing or fulfilling, but I can definitely take a look and post it here at the bottom of the thread. Travis was just asking, I guess, where we're going to post the response for the Shopify question, or like the integration question on if hierarchies end up working just the same way with integrations. So I believe after today's webinar, we can still post in the Facebook thread. So this will link to our Facebook channel, and in there you'll be able to see the thread that's linked to this webinar. Um, I don't know if we could post it anywhere else
Yeah,
to make
I'm
it
just
very
trying to think. But you know what? I think it's safe to say, and again, we will double check, but when orders come in from Shopify to inFlow, it's not user specific. So we can definitely say that, or very likely say that the user defaults aren't going to override that. But why don't we post it in the Facebook thread? I think that might be best. And if you don't hear back from us, or if you have any trouble getting that answer, reach out to our support team over live chat, or on our support page. You can email us at support@inflowinventory.com, if that wasn't too fast for you, and we'd be happy to help there as well.
Yeah. And as well, if you have any questions regarding your plan, so adding multiple locations, if you're on a light plan, reach out to us. We could see what we could do. Technically, the light plan is only for one location, and the next plan would be the standard plan that allows you to have multiple locations. But still, reach out to us, and we can definitely help you out. So I'll post our support email just below in the thread, so that if you guys have any additional questions, you can always just send us an email there.
Yeah, definitely reach out to us.
Mhm. And I don't know if we have the Facebook link yet. I can definitely take a look. Um, but if you go onto our inFlow inventory, it's on our community channel, I believe. That's where we're going to post this webinar. And so in there, you'll be able to find just the thread for all the comments that we have.
Yeah, let me go ahead. I'm going to post that in the chat right now. It's going to be a link to our Facebook group, so
Mhm.
be sure to join us there. Um, the Facebook Live event should be there, and there should be a thread going on if we did everything right.
Yeah, and then another question by Ozzy was just again with the Shopify integration, if he's using the production process with the sub locations, if that will automatically integrate with Shopify. And that again, we'll have to check on just the hierarchy of how sub locations are picked with the integration. I think it does use your settings that you have set up in inFlow for picking. So it would just be based on that. It's not really. Um, gonna know your process, like what order your process comes in. So maybe a solution to that would be adding a number in front of each process, so each step in your process, so that you could do it by like sequential order. I think that could potentially help.
We're setting
Yeah.
up those product default sublocations as well, because yeah, it feels like inFlow would definitely go by those when sales
Mm-hmm.
orders are coming in from Shopify. But yeah, we'll double check so that we're not giving you wrong information. But
Mm-hmm.
good
Definitely.
questions.
And I think that's pretty much it.
All right.
And again, if you guys have any other questions, feel free to reach out to us at the support email or on the Facebook thread.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thank you everyone for joining us today. It's been really nice to see the participation too. So, yeah, I guess we'll see you guys for our next webinar next month. Look out for that. We'll be happy to see you there again too.
Yeah, sorry. And then one last question
Oh
before we
yeah.
go, I guess from Travis, is he has consignment items. So it's not a default pick, it's a preferred to grab consignment first. So
Mm.
with that, again, if it's, you can set consignment as the default location for products, definitely do it by product. But if it's something that's going to need to be assigned afterwards, you might have to go in to the integration orders and specifically choose it there.
You can also set your location to your consignment location as your default location if that's what you want to always default to.
Mhm,
If that's a main location. If it's a sub location, yes, you'll want to do it by product default sub location.
mhm. Perfect. Okay. Well, I hope everyone has a great day. Thank you again,
Yeah.
Daniela, for doing this webinar. It was amazing,
Thank
very
you.
informative.
Oh,
Um,
anytime.
so hopefully this clarifies a few things for you guys, and you guys can have all your locations set up correctly.
Yeah, and thank you for being the hostess with the mostest as usual. The co-hostess with the most. You're the best. So thank you,
Nah,
everyone.
nah, it's all you. Thanks again, you
Aw,
guys.
anytime, guys. All right. Well,
Bye.
take care, everyone.
See ya. Bye bye.
Bye.